morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jason Fitzroy Jeffers, co-executive director and co-founder of Third Horizon. Thank you so much for everybody who's been tuning into our panels during Sundance Film Festival 2021, presented in partnership with O Cinema. Third Horizon is a Caribbean filmmaking collective, stages the annual Third Horizon Film Festival, and O Cinema is one of Miami's most beloved our host cinemas. You need no introduction to Sundance Film Festival, I'm sure. So anyway, we are so excited to be having this conversation this morning with Shaka King, director of Judas and the Black Messiah. I know some of you were able to catch the world premiere last night, and I'm sure that you similarly feel, I'm betting that you similarly feel that you've witnessed a watershed moment. So anyway, we're going to talk about that with Shaka. We're going to kick it to the trailer, the film, and then we're going to come back on and have a conversation with him. So please stick around.
I want to share something with you. Like the masses, I was in awe when I first laid eyes on all the things you are. I heard that speech. I knew we'd make noise. I just thought it'd be in the streets.
The Black Panthers are the single greatest threat to our national security. Our counterintelligence program must prevent the rise of a Black Messiah.
You're looking at 18 months for the stolen car, 5 years for impersonating a federal officer, or you can go home.
What do you want?
Get close to Hampton.
The Black Panthers are forming a rainbow coalition of oppressed brothers and sisters of every color.
Neutralize him by any means necessary.
America's on fire right now. And until that fire is extinguished, nothing else means a damn thing. Imagine what we could accomplish together. We can heal this whole city.
You ain't tell me it was gonna be like this. These ain't no terrorists.
We got a rat, man.
Does anybody else know about me?
No one knows your identity.
Are you sure?
We educate, we nurture, we feed, and we lobby. Perhaps we're here for more than just war with these bodies. We scream, and we shout, and we live by this anthem. But it's power to the people really worth their ransom.
When I dedicated my life to people, I dedicated my life.
You get to go out there and talk about dying a revolutionary death because you don't have another person growing inside your body.
Anywhere there's people, there's power.
Please join me in welcoming to your screen Shaka King.
How are you?
Please, Shaka, how you doing, man?
I'm good, boss. I'm dark in here. Let me get a little light on my face. All right, there we go.
Cool. Yeah, man, so yeah, let's just get right into it, man. Well, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And, you know, to get right into it, I mean, how did you pull this off? And I asked that, and I don't mean, you know, I don't just mean your team and, you know, who did you work with and casting and DP. I don't mean, like, how did you pull this off? I mean, this is, we know to make a film of this nature, so big with Black revolutionary love, so strident in this message. We know that these kinds of narratives have been so difficult to pull off at this scale in Hollywood, and I can think of so few examples. So yeah, how did you pull it off?
You know, first of all, you know, to start with, first of all, thanks for doing this. You know, because I have a ton of respect for Third Horizon. you know, and yeah, it's just great to talk to y'all. And also thank you for, you know, kind of acknowledging the challenge in that, because I think it's something that can sometimes get lost. And I, you know, I think it's obviously different for, you know, someone like you who's a filmmaker as well, you know what I'm saying, and part of a filmmaking collective, because I think we have a much greater intimate knowledge of the challenges in trying to navigate Hollywood, you know what I'm saying, especially the studio system. And this was my first time really dipping my toe in that, just because I'd been so disgusted even by indie. You know what I'm saying? Just like that was enough to have me just like, yo, I'm going to TV. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, I'm just gonna go, you know, make money in TV and make my little shorts and have my, you know, have my little fiefdom here, you know what I mean, that I can control. And I was on that way for a long time. Honestly, I have to start by always giving the credit to the Lucas brothers who came to me with the idea, because within the idea and their presentation of it, which was this, they said, we want to make a movie about Fred Hampton and William O'Neill, and we envisioned it as The Departed set inside the world of COINTELPRO. And that to me was the hack. That was the hack. You know what I'm saying? Like, I saw that so clearly what that could be, and that was the way the Trojan horse sewn all of the things you talked about. You know what I mean? That I just was like, it just was a brilliant, brilliant package. You know, and yeah, that is really the main reason I think why the movie even was considered a possibility. And then it was really, you know, there's a lot of challenges in making this film. It's a very vast story. To do it properly, you actually need to make a TV series, you know, a limited series. You honestly, it's impossible to really talk about the life of, you know, Fred Hampton and the Cointegeri and the Illinois chapter, and, you know, the state-sanctioned terrorism that led to obviously the assassination, but also the cover-up of the assassination plot, you know, for 12 years after the fact in that crazy court trial. And then of course, prior to that, the fact that Fred Hampton had his phone tapped at 14 years old. So who was that person? You know, to do it kind of soup to nuts, you couldn't even do it in a 3-hour movie properly. You really would need a limited series. Yeah. And so part of it, I think, was also recognizing that, okay, you can't do that. So what can you do? You know? And again, so much of it was baked into the Lucas brothers pitch that they pitched me on. So I think, you know, it was a challenge, and obviously like bringing the family on board too, what, you know, created its own set of challenges and opportunities, you know. But it ultimately, you know, it was all of us, myself, my producers, the studio, and the family finding points of interest and recognizing that we were that this was a moment this big to kind of get this made. Because not only is it the package that the Lucas brothers put together, it's the fact that, you know, you look at my two of my producers, my two primary producers, and Ryan Coogler and Charles King. You know, Ryan Coogler coming off the heels of $1 billion success. You know, he could have walked into any studio and you would have thought he could have walked into any studio and got anything he wanted greenlit. You know, he wanted to get this greenlit, and even he could only get it greenlit at one studio. He couldn't, the other studios, you know, they weren't willing to, you know, pony up the budget. And then to have the other producer and Charles King willing to put up half of the budget and finance half of the film, that never happens. And you know, and so it was a number of factors that made it possible.
Yeah. So I know, you know, the Lucas brothers, you know, they brought this to you. But, you know, big up yourself too, because you could have easily said, I mean, one of the things that I was thinking, well, let me take it back here, is that, you know, while we've seen so much iconography of the Black Panthers in popular culture over the last few years, there really haven't been that many cinematic explorations of them. And So what was it about Fred that you responded to? Sorry, that's a nice screenshot.
No, of course, no. You're lucky. What I responded to first and foremost were his words. It was first reading his speeches and seeing these ideas that, often in academic texts are presented in a very complex, almost sometimes it feels like intentionally convoluted way when they're very simple ideas. So the fact that he was able to reduce his ability to reduce and communicate and do so in a way that was also incredibly clever and witty and funny, the humor that he was like, and he just had, like he had bars, man. He had lines. He just had these one-liners. I would just be like, yo, whoa, like the opportunity to put that in a movie, to have someone say that in a film,
yeah,
in a Hollywood film, like that's attractive. And then to hear him, and that elevated it to an entirely a whole new level, because to hear how he expressed his words, just his abilities as an orator, like I remember hearing him be like, yo, like this dude is really emceeing, you know what I mean? And like I saw the possibilities just from a directorial standpoint of having like, these almost like incredible performance, incredible just like set pieces just around his speaking, coupled with these other set pieces, that kind of lean more into the genre. And, the work I've been doing since I really started making films has always been like trying to like synthesize. It's like kind of like collage work in terms of styles and tones, and really trying to synthesize a couple of different things and kind of make something new. And so I just saw so many opportunities to kind of bring in so many different elements that would make the story like compelling, but also crazy entertaining.
Yeah. I want to say to the audience, please drop your questions in the chat. I can't promise that we'll have that much time to get to many of them. Shaka has a long day. The film just premiered last night, so we have a lot of ground to cover, but we'll try to do as much as we can. Speaking about performances, I mean, there's such great performances in this film. Can you talk about, I mean, I want to get to Lakeith, I want to get to Dominique, but what Daniel brought to this, can you talk about the process of finding him and like settling on him for this role and everything that his method, his preparation, and
yeah. I didn't hear the last thing you said. You cut out.
Yeah, just how did he come to embody Fred? Process like? What was your process working with him like?
So the truth of the matter is that I wrote it for him without really, I really, not to sort of sound like mystical or anything, but I wrote it for him. I wrote it for Dominique. I wrote it for Lakeith. I wrote it for Jesse. I was seeing all of their work. I knew them as performers, but I didn't know Daniel as a person whatsoever. And it's not like I'd seen something that made me say, oh, he's this guy. I just knew this is a really good actor. And for whatever reason, I can't see anyone but him when I'm writing this dialogue. And so I remember, telling Ryan that I wanted to cast him, and Ryan, pitching him on it on the set of Black Panther. And so the two of us sat down and met. And immediately a few attributes kind of popped out at me that let me know that I was on to something. One, he's incredibly mature for a person his age. And, one of the things that I remember reading about Fred, I had a friend who gave me this like rare book of testimonials from people who knew Fred personally. And it would always come up his maturity for someone his age. And another thing about Dan was that he was really funny and really witty and really young and really kind of like, brash in a lot of ways, and that was another quality that I mean, I think you could listen to Fred speak and look at Fred and know that, but also, again, this is something that people would touch upon. And so that combination of like gravitas and youthful charisma, you don't really find often in one person. And identifying that in my actor was like, something that I kind of leaned into. I think it was something else I was going to say about Daniel. I'm on this. Oh, another thing about Daniel, and you'll see it in the movie. And I didn't realize it until I was actually on a call with someone recently who's working with us, and they talked about an interview Daniel gave where they were kind of complaining about, they felt like he was disinterested, or like they said he was like being mean. And I was like, no, he's just listening. When Daniel listens, he really listens. He does something that most people don't do, which is, you know how like you and I are talking and like I agree with you and you go, you're not yet. He won't do that shit. Like he's just like, you know what I mean? Like he's just really listening. He's not gonna affirm what you're saying until you're done speaking, and then he goes, okay. And there's a lot of power in that. And there's that takes a real lack of fear, and so I felt like, even though I don't know that Fred Hampton had that quality, it wouldn't surprise me if he did. And there was just so much power in that I think, people have talked about Daniel's eyes in the movie, but a lot of times when you're seeing Daniel, a lot of times like when you're watching Daniel give an amazing, intense performance in a movie, it's because he's listening. He's really listening. And you're watching a person actually really listen. And there's a lot of power in that. So those were a few just traits he had. Now, in terms of how he got to actually, him embodying Fred, it was a number of things, some that we did in concert and some, many that he did on his own. We got together for about 4 days in like LA a year before we started rolling. And we just did we just played around with some voices, you know what I mean? He'd done a little bit of voice work. I played him some weird influences, man. I was like, listen to these things. I was like, we talked about Busta Rhymes and how like, Fred had like sort of a cadence he had when he spoke and the cadence he had when he gave speeches, and how on Touch It, like Busta Rhymes had, he has those two. Right. And we talked about that, and it was a joke. It was fun. We would, I played him Bernie Mac. You know what I mean? I was like, Bernie Mac. It's like there's a little bit of Bernie Mac. I was like, it sounds like there's some Bernie Mac in there. I was like, there's a little, Eddie Murphy has that one voice he used to do, like Stevie Wonder, the musical G. I was like, there's a little bit of that in there. Yeah. We played his son. We listened to his son a lot because I was like, I was like, his son is like, sounds so much like his father. And then of course we listened to Fred, and we talked about whether it was going to be a sort of faithful adaptation a la, Jamie Foxx and Ray, where you can't tell the difference in terms of how they sound, or if it was going to be more like Denzel and Malcolm X, where it's an interpretation. We decided to go for the latter just because I believe, and I have no evidence of this, but I believe that there's a good chance, because I have a few friends, I should say, of a deviated septum. And so a lot of times you hear, they have a sort of old kind of sound in their tonality. And it can make it sometimes hard to hear what they're saying. And that combined with the speed with which Fred often spoke, and like the Louisiana drawl and the Chicago, he had a lot of things going on that you just, quite frankly, they wouldn't allow us to put subtitles on the movie. So it was like, we got to slow you down. You can't speak as fast as Fred. You have to speak slower. And we're going to have to lose a little bit of the O sound a little, but you just got to get enough of a flavor of it. And it's going to sound so far from you that I think people are going to just roll with it, even though it's not a literal adaptation. It's like I said, it's more like Denzel and Malcolm X. And then he just went off with his voice coach, Audrey LaCrone, who actually ended up doing voice work for the whole cast. She's incredible. They really did a ton of work together. He had all these like I said, we looked at these speeches as set pieces. So he would have to, do these speeches 12 times at, the top of his lungs. He was going to lose his voice. So he studied opera so that he could learn to kind of speak from his diaphragm and really project from there. And then he just like put on pounds. And the man, in terms of the research, he read every book on the Panthers reading list. He really tried to first come from this, from, what were these people doing then? And how can I apply that? How can I do that now? How can I actually do that now and educate myself in that way now? And then he started to actually research the person. But first he tried to he kind of started from researching what they researched to become the person they became.
Right.
It was a real inside out approach for him.
Cool. Now, on the flip, this is a film, the title Judas and the Black Messiah kind of clues the audience into the fact that there are dual protagonists here, or in some ways, or I guess I should say, this is as much Lakeith's movie as it is, Daniel's, as much William O'Neill's movie as it is Fred Hampton's. Can you talk about, this? I can only imagine how difficult a role this would have been for Lakeith because of what he has to embody, because of what he represents. The emotional expanse that he has to traverse in this film is astonishing. And then, to say there's also the fact that he looks so much like William O'Neill. It's stunning. You talk a bit about what he brought to this.
Yeah. I mean, to start with, I just want to acknowledge, I told him, so on the 50th anniversary of Fred Hampton's assassination, we had to shoot the scene where he drugs Fred Hampton. And it was towards the end of the shoot, so it was one of Daniel's last days. And Keith woke up throwing up and crying the whole day. He was just a mess. He felt awful. And I only now, he kind of shared with me recently, I didn't know that he was kind of tapping into some things that had happened in his own personal life, deep trauma, to sort of get to that place. I didn't realize that. And that's probably why he was in the state that he was in. And so, I remember telling him, I was like, yo, like you have the hardest job out of all of us because, Daniel is playing an icon. That's a challenge. Dominique is playing a living icon. That's a challenge. I was like, but you have the thankless job of playing William O'Neill. It's thankless, I was like, but because you're willing to play this role, people will learn about Fred Hampton and they'll learn about the sacrifices of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. And ideally, they'll get interested in not just this history, but these politics and just like, more and more and more. So you're really making the greatest contribution to this project, and that's how I feel. What did I see in him to sort of think he could pull this off? There were a few things. One, like, it was really hard to craft that character for my co-writer, Will Burson, and I, because we started from a place of, oh, this was a sociopath. And that's a very easy way to dismiss and it's also very easy to come to that conclusion because he's so perplexing. When you look specifically at that Eyes on the Prize 2 interview, we didn't have the video until we were in Cleveland in prep, but we read the transcript from the beginning and we read it 1 million times. And it was just like, it did not quite give you a window in this person because he's lying so often. He's lying to himself. He's so deep in the lie that he doesn't know where the lie begins and ends. He talks about we and us, and you don't know if he's talking about the feds or if he's talking about the Panthers. And his answer at the end of that interview, the one that we end the movie on, I think crystallizes and sums up just how deeply the lie was embedded in him, And so it's a character that kind of gives you no answers in terms of, where he stands, and so it's an interesting protagonist, but it's not a traditional Hollywood protagonist in that way. And so Lakeith, the reason I think I was drawn to him to do it was that eventually Will and I were like, okay, we have to, and really this was largely, Ryan was really adamant that, he was like, this whole sociopath thing, like you can't hang your hat on it. He's like, you're scared to make him sympathetic, you know? And I was like, you're right. I am hesitating to do that. Like, and I had to kind of go back and say, okay, well, let's like sort of really think about this person and how you get from point A to point B, you know? Like, just what would you do? What did he want? And what did he, like, if this is a tragedy, because this was how I really ended up kind of making peace with it. I was like, if this is a tragedy, then it's a movie about a person who sets out to get what he wants. And then when he gets what he wants, he realizes it's not at all what he wants, you know? So, okay, this is a guy who he wants, his definition of freedom and power is he's a Black capitalist. You know what I'm saying? He's just a Black capitalist. Like, and I could kind of understand that. Like, there's a reason why like drug dealers make great businessmen when they go legit, because they've been great businessmen when they were selling drugs. They were just, one is deemed illegal by white people and one is not, you know? So like, when you looked at it that way, it was just like, okay, well, yeah, like guy steals a car, you know, he wants this. It's very clear that he desires this thing, you know what I mean? And, you know, eventually, there's this old line in Shaka Zulu where Shaka Zulu says, how do you catch a monkey with something shiny, you know? And, you know, in that scene when William O'Neill goes to Roy Mitchell's house, and Roy Mitchell seduces him with the trappings of, you know, America, you know what I'm saying? He's got leather seats and whiskey, and like, he rope-a-dope this fool. You know what I'm saying? And O'Neill's seduced, and like Mitchell's talking to him, and he's like not even listening to him. It's like that scene it's a scene that I think confuses so many people, but I really love the scene because like you really understand O'Neill in that moment. You know, Mitchell's talking to him about, you know, he's trying to like get him on board with his politics, and O'Neill's like, whatever. Yo, how do you get this though? How'd you get all this money? You know, and can I get some? And Mitchell's like, yeah, you can. And now he's got him. You know what I mean? Now, because we realize O'Neill's not motivated by a politic. You know what I mean? At any point, he remains apolitical. His politic is capitalism, which is so many of our politic. You know, it's just like, he's like, oh yeah, I want this, you know? And he's motivated by that. And so he's acquiring that. And if you look at the movie early on, he's not really being asked to do much, you know? Like, what Mitchell's like, tell me what you hear. And that's how they do with informants. They don't just say for flat out, hey, go poison this dude. It escalates. You know what I'm saying? Give me a blueprint of the spot. You know, give me this thing. You know, they layer it on you, you know? And so, you know, we just kind of wanted to sort of chart that out and then show how eventually they will ask you to poison them. And they have tons of dirt on you. They've been collecting this entire time that they can use to weaponize on you. And so, you know, ultimately it was like us kind of recognizing that even though he was it's weird, like, because I keep to this day struggle to hesitate to call him a victim, even though he is, you know, but I think you can be a victim and I don't have to feel sorry for you. You know what I mean? Like, I don't feel sorry for William O'Neill. To me, like, this movie isn't necessarily sympathetic to William O'Neill. And all it does is just give context to his decisions.
Right. So we only have about 10 minutes left. I have two questions. I would be remiss if I did not mention or ask about Dominique Fishback, because she is just so breathtaking in this film. And the women of this film, the women of the Panthers, and the sense of community and love. Anyway, there's so many things I want to talk to you about. I know we will talk in the future, but can you talk a bit about Dominique? Let's start.
I would love to. I can do that for 10 minutes and more.
Well, I do have one more question after this.
Okay. well, then we can just go a little later. Yeah. Dominique Fishback, you know, I saw her in Show Me a Hero. It was the first thing I saw her in. And I love non-actors. And I was like, this is a great non-actor because she was so good that I just assumed that I was
Amazing.
like, she's a not, right? And then I was like, holy shit, no, her craft is that strong that you don't see the craft. That's great craft, you know? And so when I was making a movie about a real person, and I just, like I said, it was intuitive, and like, you close your eyes, not close your eyes, you're writing, so you close your eyes, but you think, and you see the person, and it was just instantly, I was like, Dominique, so crazy thing was, she joined, we ended up at the same agency a year before we started rolling. And so I was like, yo, I want you to do this. We live in the same borough, met up, and I sent her the script, and she wrote back with like really, really thoughtful notes and insightful notes. And she was like, yo, I want to, if I say I'm a poet, I want to contribute a poem. And this is just like a brief story to give you, just because what I'd say with all of my, incredible actors, like I really crafted the character with them, and they had a tremendous hand in crafting that character. But like Dominique, both Fishback and Dominique Thorne, I really, really, really I just relied on them so much to help me develop this character, because as you mentioned, look, the Illinois chapter was mostly women. You know what I'm saying? And the Women of the Panthers, even though there was rampant misogyny on a national level, like they had incredible power and presence within the party. And in the Illinois chapter, there was actually a lot more gender equity, And so, Will Burstyn and I, we started out, this was kind of like Battle of Algiers in terms of the scale of, you had all these different people we were focusing on, who we ended up having to scrub from the movie as we had to, make it for the price point we did, and make it honestly the genre crime drama that we promised, to get the backing. And in doing so, we were like, shit, this movie is really becoming almost exclusively about the security cadre. There were no women in the security cadre. We're finding that we're losing the women in this story. You know what I mean? So it was in if you look at the movie, it's like Dominique Fishback, or rather Deborah Johnson, Judy Harmon, and Mrs. Winters are kind of like and thankfully we have 3 actors who are just doing the work in such a rich way that they attract attention, and you feel their power and their might, and they have such a strong presence, and you see women Panthers throughout the film, but it's something that I still feel kind of doesn't, it falls short of the actual historical accuracy, you know what I mean? But I say all that to say, Dominique Fishback and Dominique Thorne especially, they had such a big hand in crafting their roles. And I know I'm up on the clock, so I'm just like rambling at this point, trying to get it all out. But like,
yeah, well, no, it's we're really happy to talk, man. Thank you for sharing all this. I guess the last question, I have so many questions, but the last one is, we live in a moment where, one of the things that struck me watching it is that here we have a very clear story of a conspiracy where the FBI, where the government killed a man who embodied and meant so much to a people. And we're actually living in a moment where there's so much conspiratorial thinking around, right? We have people posing as Black people online on Twitter and throwing stuff out into cyberspace to rile us up, divide us. We have echoes of the authorities bursting in to Fred's apartment and killing him in the murder of Breonna Taylor. What do you want people to be thinking about? Let me put it this way. How responsible did you feel, not just to the past, to Fred Hampton's story, but to the present, to what we're dealing with now, and the possibility of William O'Neill's being in our very midst right now, and what we are faced with as a people?
I just feel like the connection is so, the connection between past, present, and future is so palpable that I didn't feel any pressure to, in a lot of ways, shine a light on that. I didn't have to do anything. That's the sad reality, is that all this shit is so evergreen. It's so unchanged. The changes take place on a very almost aesthetic surface level, but the framework underneath is so consistent that it really, I'll be honest with you, like, you know, it was only looking at it after we'd made certain decisions where I was like, oh wow, yeah, that's a direct nod. People are going to think about this in 2020. You know, when I'm thinking of it, like, for example, you know, we start the movie with footage and newspaper clippings of the Martin Luther King rebellions that took place around the nation after his assassination. And we did that because I remember watching an interview with Bobby Seale where he talked about that event basically being almost the greatest Panther recruitment tool. How like the Panther chapters started just popping up around the nation without them even knowing after King's assassination. And you know, it happening in '68, our movie starting in '68, it felt like the right way to start the movie. There's a quote in the archival footage from H. Rap Brown where, you know, he says, you know, these are not riots, these are rebellions, and he contextualizes, you know, the choices that you know, we as Black folks make when we go out there and we, like, you know, set the city on fire, you know. And I just remember that happening, you know, during the uprising, you know, in Minnesota, and just like thinking, oh yeah, people are gonna draw parallels between these two, you know. And it's not even because I'm drawing parallels, but I'm just telling the story. Like my goal, to be honest, was to make you sit down, and when 1968 came on screen, leave you in 1968 until the end credits came on. But the truth of the matter is that 1968 and 2021, the linkage is so you know, strong and severe that you can't help but see 2021 in the film. So it has a lot less to do with me.
Well, speaking of you, sorry, I said there were two more questions, but one last question. Mm-hmm. You just ended on the word you. How has your frequency shifted or changed, or how have you grown, or how are you coming out of this or into this, what your life and is now after making this? How have you shifted or changed, or what have you learned? You know,
I haven't, you know, I'm like just starting to have, I'll be honest with you, I haven't really had the space to take stock of that, really. I know I've had so many things in the last 2 years happen to me on a familial level, on a, you know, making this movie level, and just pandemic world level, that, you know, I'm definitely a different person than I was when I started this film, but I haven't even really been able to sort of take the time to think about the ways in which that I have changed. But I know I have, you know.
Well, however, you know, we support you in your growth, and we thank you more than anything else for making.
Thank you.
As I said at the top of this, I really do feel like this is a watershed moment. I woke up and I read all the reviews, The Guardian, LA Times, Hollywood Reporter, Variety, all these raves. I hear that Twitter is going wild, and it's all warranted. You know, we have been so few instances that we've seen a film this uncompromising in its depiction of this struggle and what it means to love your people and to really be willing to die for that, you know, to go all out for that. And so thank you on behalf of Third Horizon or Cinema. Thank you for taking the time today. And yeah.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for having me, man.
All good, man.
Yo, take care, bro.
Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoy the rest of your Sundance Film Festival 2021 that wraps tomorrow. Judas and the Black Messiah is out next week on HBO Max. I believe it's February 12th. So please tell a friend, tell your folks that they need to see this film. I'm Jason Fitzroy Jeffers from Third Horizon. Thank you so much.